Hello, I'm Edgar Canelas and I'll be presenting a summary of the practical aspects of my master's final project. This project set out to understand how several techniques and approaches to design ambiguous and uncertain sounds may affect emotional experiences within the context of a survival or video game. In specific, ambiguity was mostly achieved by obstructing the sound source and uncertainty through irregular and unpredictable trigger times. Towards this goal, a horror game level 2 versions was designed as well as sounds, sound systems, and events to enhance the horror ambience. First, I will describe the game level layout and progression. In summary, there are a total of 4 sub-levels starting at level 0 and ending at level -3. Each level contains a set of rooms and corridors with specific geometry, width and height values, and a selected group of static meshes and sounds. The main objective and gameplay loop is to walk downwards until the exit. The flowchart contains an overview of the game level areas and progression. One version of the level was designed to incentivize audiovisual associations due to the reoccurrence of game events and similar thematic areas. In contrast, the other version, game events were programmed to trigger based on a simple random system or alternatively between playthrough sessions. In summary, most of the game logic and events were programmed as follows. After the player crosses the trigger box, the game checks which game version is active. This is controlled by a bool variable. Then the logic checks for the type of trigger. Random-based triggers were set with a predefined chance of being true or false. If the result is false, it increases the chance to true the next time the player crosses the trigger. And if the result is true, it defaults the chance value and plays the game event. Alternating per playthrough session triggers follow a similar logic that checks for the game version. It checks for a global variable of type bool that is set in the game instance blueprint. This bool changes to true upon level restart. If the result is true, the trigger plays the game event. Additionally, most triggers are also controlled with a do-once node that is reset upon level restart. Irregular game event triggers and sound sequences were used to induce uncertainty. For example, the following clip demonstrates the sequence during water pipes corridors, which is randomized or not depending on the game version. Other triggers were set to stimulate ambiguity of the sound source. Notably, the following clip demonstrates a trigger that sets an audio emitter with high-pitched sounds representing movement. This emitter follows behind player's character when moving via a spline while gradually increasing volume. In summary, several other game events were set to trigger throughout the game level. For example, the flowchart illustrates the logic and sequence of relevant primary and secondary events during level -2. Most have random chance to trigger, but others trigger regardless of game version or trigger once in either playthrough session. The soundscape was designed with the focus of exploring ambiguity of the sound source, and was mostly achieved by the design and implementation of area loops, source loops, and special audio features. Area loops are ambient sounds that have a wider spread, are not affected by the room reverb, and characterize the overall aesthetic of the game level. These were set throughout the level. In Wise, the attenuation was set to drastically lower the volume the closer the player is to the emitter, and the low-pass filter was set to stimulate occlusion and distant activities. Moreover, the source was randomized between 4 opposite points in the 3D field. However, to maintain consistency with the game progression, the reverb effect was controlled via a switch, that in turn controls RTBC. This lowers decay and pre-delay time as the player progresses. In the Unreal Engine, this was set in an audio manager blueprint and set multiple position nodes to reduce voice count and prevent overlapping sounds. A similar behavior was set to some source loops, in which the audio emitter is muted depending on player's character proximity. Source loops are ambient sounds that are affected by special audio features and characterize the location they are placed. For example, the water pipes running loop is set to play in all water pipes corridors and can be heard before entering through diffraction. Several special audio features were designed and implemented using WISE. Overall, these features allow acoustic behaviors such as diffraction, obstruction, directional and diffuse reverb, and early reflections, and these may elevate anxiety due to the masking of the sound source. First, audio volume and portal actors were set in all level, matching the geometry. Audio volumes also allow the use of transmission loss per surface that replaces visibility-based occlusion and to set with the auxiliary buses with reverb. This way, reverb changes based on the listener position. Surfaces also allow the use of early reflection that was applied to most source loop emitters. Similarly, portals act as a secondary emitter for the emitters with diffraction enabled. For example, the following clip demonstrates this behavior. Lastly, diffraction and other special audio features were also used in WISE to drive RTPCs and modulate parameters. Players' character movement and foley sounds were designed and implemented to increase immersion and avoid sound repetition. For example, a wide range of motions were designed, a procedural approach was taken to implement footstep sounds, and the crouching state was set to change parameters to simulate lighter movement. In Unreal Engine, the implementation was done by creating sockets in the skeleton and attaching AK components into them. These will then trigger the footstep sound matching the foot for a subtle variation in the stereo field. Footstep sounds on stairs add a different implementation approach, in which the surface slope angle is detected by two ray trace nodes. The slope angle values are compared to drive RTPC that change a Y switch. Moreover, standing still for 10 seconds has a 70% chance to play generic ambient sounds around the player's character. A timeline node starts counting after the player stops moving, and stops when the player moves. A second timeline node was set to fade out sounds, and an extra logic was set to prevent this trigger when the player is near existing emitters that play the same sound. Lastly, progression was also designed to potentially elevate anxiety through claustrophobia, as the overall walkable space gradually decreases each sublevel. As such, special audio features were implemented accordingly. Notably, early reflection settings applied to footstep sounds were the opposite to those applied to ambient sounds. As a result, footstep sounds increase volume and higher frequencies the closer the player is to walls. This concludes the technical summary of the project. If it is of interest, there is a second more in-depth video that includes the theoretical context, research data, and other details. Thank you for watching.